in the same business as you as a technology company. We're all trying to do the same things for ourselves. We talk about we're building our solution and our platform for ourselves, not for anyone else, which is to give us a chance to be at the residence of our choice, whether it's in the home or in a community, as long and safe and comfortable as possible. And that's what Gene was talking about, and that's what we do. I don't want to spend a lot of time on our stuff because there's a lot to talk about innovation. So Webster defines innovation pretty simply, something new, a method or device. For today, I added a couple more qualifiers. It really has to solve a problem. We can do all sorts of innovative things as long as they don't solve a problem. That's not really interesting to us. And also, it has to be nonlinear, something that's different, something that maybe isn't obvious. So the question for today is, why is innovation so hard? We all talk about it. We've been in the industry for a long time. It doesn't go away. Everyone talks about innovation. We talked about it last night. And the reason really is that innovation is not about actions becoming outcomes. So we have a problem, we go to solve a problem, we come up with a method, and we make it happen. Our focus has always been on actions. That's the easy way to do it, and that's the normal way to do it. Where innovation comes in is when we actually change our focus, and when we focus on beliefs, and we focus on behavior, and we nurture a system, and it's really about individuals and culture that then come up with actions that may not be the same, that then solve problems differently. And so for today, I want to share with you some anecdotes and also some methods around how to make that happen. So we all know the story here, right? What we may not really know or think about deeply about Blockbuster versus Netflix is Blockbuster didn't go out of business because Netflix came out and came up with DVD players that they rented over mail. That was a big part of it. It started it. But Blockbuster had all the contracts. They had all the content. So what happened? Netflix and Blockbuster both saw streaming media and streaming delivery of content at the same time. It wasn't a mystery. It was going to happen. Except Reed Hastings, the CEO and founder of Netflix, went to his board, and he basically said, there's going to be chaos here, and we have to do something about it. It's going to take over, not now, but down the road. And so they ended up building a plan, and it was about a belief that they thought something different was the right thing to go about doing. And they went through some changes, and ultimately, we don't get DVDs through mail anymore. We stream them down. And Blockbuster never really went down that path. They took the same actions as they did before. They added other retail things in their stores, and that's how they tried to increase their revenue. So we're in a similar position. We talked about it. Bill talked about it yesterday, and we got challenged by Gene's great presentation. We're going to hear it over the next couple days. I'd recommend two books. Innovator's Dilemma is my favorite book of all time for business. If you haven't read it, you really should. It talks about how innovative technologies really get disrupted coming out of left field. And so it applies to business as well. The other one is The Rainforest. And the benefit of the one on the right is really talks about how you can nurture the culture inside your organizations as leaders and create that environment where you can be innovative internally with great business benefits. I don't know who has a goatee here. Anyone with a goatee? That's pretty innovative to me. I think that's, if I had a goatee, I'd use that. It solves a problem, it's accurate, you get things done more quickly, it's probably not obvious, and even though it may be embarrassing, nobody's probably around to see it. This one, it does solve a problem. And maybe if nobody else is around, you might use it, but I'm not sure about that. I don't think it's very cool. Okay? On the other hand, this is really cool, but it doesn't solve a problem. So a lot of times we talk about innovation really without the context of the other two definitions that I shared, and it's really important to solve big problems. So as an industry, show of hands, how many think we're in a very innovative industry? That's about right. How many people think they either lead or belong to an innovative organization? Isn't that interesting? That's pretty normal, right? We did a webinar some time ago, and we asked that question about the industry versus your organization versus yourself. And if I asked a third question, the same number of hands as the second time would go up. So we really have to actually do things, not think about things within our organization. And the challenge that doesn't apply just to our industry, in any industry, is if you look at Moore's crossing the chasm, there's really two chasms. There's the first chasm with the early adopters and between the innovators and the early adopters, and then there's a bigger chasm, which is all about really taking hold in an industry and moving new technologies and new innovations. It doesn't have to be technology forward. And over the next couple days, this is the Innovation Forum, I think we should all be challenged around how do we move from the green to the yellow, and how do we move from the yellow to the orange, because then it all happens. Part of the reasons things don't happen, they didn't happen at Blockbuster in 1876. This is what Western Union thought of this new technology called the telephone. And if we were to hear Bill Thomas last night and him talking about his new company, I'm sure there's some people that are skeptic and they might resist that. Then you sort of think about it as maybe it's innovative, and then ultimately it might become the standard. That's the great thing about it. But on the surface, as we heard earlier, Newton didn't see something different than anyone else. He just did something different with it. And these guys chose to do nothing with that. 101 years later, Ken Olsen basically lost his entire company on this decision that personal computers are never going to catch on, right? And so we have to be, at least if we're not innovative, we have to at least be followers. We have to at least think about the things that are happening. So this is always interesting through the three stages of truth. So if you're not looking out for the ridicule and the possibilities, then pretty soon it might hit you when it's too late and others are doing things. So who knows what picture this is? Somebody's got to know. What was that? Yes, exactly. So this was a ridiculous idea in the Netherlands by one lady. It's crazy. She had basically she wanted to build a dementia village, and we've heard this. It's on 60 Minutes. It's I don't want to say old news. It's great news. But it changed the way how people address Alzheimer's. And she had huge resistance. It wasn't like a great idea. Everybody said, oh, this is perfect. She wasn't making more money. She had the same government opportunities in terms of funding as anyone else. But in that environment today, you get less interventions, longer lives, less medication, higher quality of life than other similar cost environments. So it's now self-evident, and people are flying all over the world over there to create similar environments. So what makes that happen? This is a quote from Einstein. Everyone had the same knowledge. Blockbuster and Netflix had the same knowledge. She had the same knowledge as everyone else. It was her imagination that made the difference. So how do we challenge ourselves to actually have the right imagination around what's possible, what Jean was talking about, what you hear from Zeke and others? So the interesting thing is when you have imagination and you believe it's possible, you don't need evidence to get there. You just need the right type of culture to get there. And if you don't believe, then it doesn't matter. So I think the biggest challenge for us is to believe and nurture that culture. In the industrial age, this is how we've come to create food. There's a lot of efficiency. We create a lot of food, and that's great. In the knowledge industry, and that's where the analogy of a rainforest comes in, the culture that actually leverages this is better than anyone else on the anywhere else on the planet is in Silicon Valley. There's not a lot of order out of that culture. There's not a lot of definitions, but it's a culture of innovation. And so how do we create that rainforest with belief and the opportunity to create great innovations? So Michael last night, when he was talking in passing, he said collaboration creates innovation. And really, that's all about collaboration. When you have lots of people having lots of ideas and creating new ways to create solution, not the same path as before. So we don't have time to state the obvious around the iPod and Apple's design and innovation. The same thing with the iPhone. They were huge. Who knows what the device on the right is? Yeah, it came out recently. It's the third version of the Amazon Echo. The second one was the dot. This one is called Amazon Look. So this is not a slide I added today or last night after I heard Bill. Amazon's going to be in our business. And we either embrace it and do all sorts of cool things with it, but they started this under the radar. It's about giving you fashion tips. You can wear different clothes, and it gives you ideas around the color coordination and some other things. But you can imagine where this is going to go. Imagine one of these in every room. Imagine being able to deliver things using Amazon. They've solved much, much bigger problems, frankly, than being able to deliver right food or maybe a lift to your door or some other services that allow you to stay in your own home longer, safer, more comfortably. And that's wonderful, because Apple's going to do it, Google's going to do it. It's a ridiculously big market, as we know. And the challenge we have is 93 out of 100 people who may need our services are not even going to ever talk to us. We're competing for the 7. If that turns to 94 or 95 because of technologies that allow you high touch and high tech, how's that going to affect the industry? And so these are the types of innovations we have to think about. So just a quick example of where we think, we do a lot of things, we think we're quite innovative, but I want to share with you, those of you who know Margaret Wild, we announced with her recently, we're going to have her surveys on our platform. Again, this was out of the box. We can talk to you, of course, separately, but just as an example, the left side is the number of processes you take to do a survey today or before. On the right side, it's on the Independa platform with Promotora on it. We cut the number of processes and steps by half in terms of quantity, but in terms of cost, we cut it down by 75%. So now there's so much more you can do. You actually have monitoring ongoing. So as a CEO, wouldn't it be great if you knew location 25 had these issues, and it's ongoing and cost effective? So credit to Promotora, and we all, in our ways, have to constantly innovate and do new things. So looking at a bunch of what to-dos and not to-dos, I'm going to go over these in sort of some fun slides, not each at a time. But the last one I want to focus on is really orthopraxy instead of orthodoxy. So orthodox has to do with follow what I say. Not do as I do necessarily, but do as I say. Orthopraxy, as leaders in the industry, means follow as I do. And the folks in this room, all of us, have the opportunity to be those leaders, to actually inspire, create that culture. And so with that, as a review, so how do we create that culture? First, it's got to solve a problem. It's not about marketing. It's not about the PR aspect of it. A lot of times we have innovation centers and cool things are happening, but when you look at where's the rollout, the business doesn't support that rollout because we're at full occupancy or because there's two other three challenges that we have to do. So creating that room for innovation is really important. To me, it's all about what you do that creates opportunities down the road. It's a culture. It's really not about what must be done today. It's never a must any given day. So if we're the frog, we need to be able to jump out of this water, just culturally. Amazon didn't have to come up with the Amazon look. They're replacing retail, brick and mortar all over the world. They have distribution figured out. They have delivery figured out. They have quality excellence. They have supply chain figured out. They're doing drones. They're doing all sorts of things. And yet they come up with something innovative again. And they're going to keep doing that because it's a culture. Ideas come from everywhere, so it's really important not to be hierarchical about them, but to be supportive of anywhere in our organization. And this is really important. There's no direct path. So the culture that you can say, hey, I can try and try and try again as long as I can fail fast and fail cost effectively, and that's celebrated. Why is Silicon Valley what it is? Because failure actually there is celebrated if you did a good job failing. If it's fast and it made sense and you worked hard, then you learned a lot. Bill Gates recently said, success is the worst teacher. So if that's true, and we're always focused on success, without having a little bit of room for that rainforest, we're not going to be able to innovate. And once you get to success, it's all about the people again. Unlike actions and outcomes, it's about the belief of the people, the support of those beliefs, and the behavior that we foster. And of course, it's really about the culture. So we're talking about culture, and we know culture eats strategy every day for breakfast, probably lunch and dinner too. So for all of us in the room, we don't want to have that happen. We can't strategize around culture. It's not a strategy. It's the other way around. The culture actually ends up moving the strategy and helping the strategy. You can't sit there and dictate, now we're going to be innovative starting Tuesday. So I'm going to close with this slide. There's a lot of order in our industry. There's a lot of inertia. There's a lot of momentum. We do things very well. We're constantly challenging ourselves to do incrementally new things. But to be really innovative, we have to create at least an environment that supports a little bit of chaos. Blockbuster was extremely orderly. They did a great job at what they used to do until they couldn't do it anymore. Same with Wang. Anyone remember Wang? Wang was pretty amazing, right? Back in the 80s, even early 90s, I'd say, Wang and IBM, well, you couldn't tell which one was going to win those wars. Nobody even knows about them anymore because there was no culture of chaos. They did the same thing. On the other hand, with chaos, with controlled chaos, with the culture that we create, all of us here, I think there's no challenge that we can't do. We heard Gene, we're going to hear others. And on our side, I'm happy to chat with you separately, of course, meet with you separately. And also, the Rainforest author is a good friend of mine. He's an advisor to Independa. And if anyone wants to get in touch with him, he does great presentations to companies and literally actually countries and cities. So happy to put you in touch with him as well. Thank you so much. Question?
Yep.
Yes, please.
Let me bring the microphone to you.
Good morning. I'm Tammy from Watermark Retirement Communities in the Arizona area, and I have a question about innovation process. Do you have any tips to share about the process itself, like how to generate an innovative or create an innovative process within your organization?
I mean, there's a bunch of small things I mentioned. There's people who can come in and help with that and meet with your teams and really talk about that. Given the time that we had, I condensed it in such little sound bites. But really the biggest thing for me is celebrating failure as long as people are thinking hard and everybody signs up towards that direction. And obviously celebrating success once it happens. So we want to iterate quickly, and it's okay to fail and iterate, and then good things come out of that. The other item is really environments where people collaborate. So you can actually force that a little bit. If there's a water cooler area or a common area for eating, you put a ping pong table or something, it works magic because you don't have the normal interdisciplinary collaboration, as Michael was saying. You want to have these ideas sort of work through the system on their own without forcing them. You can't have a meeting to then just innovate. But I'd encourage the Rainforest book as well as Innovator's Dilemma.
See, to me, absolutely agree with Kian. Innovation is a culture, really. As a CEO of a company, I was the only one who was very innovative and inventive 7 years ago. The first video that I showed actually was launched in 2011. The program was designed in 2004. I designed the architectural, all the environmental space in 2004. I didn't have the money at that time. One of the things I realized was we came up with a slogan called Disrupt, which is chaos. And D stands for something, I stands for something. What we did was, for the last 2 years or so, we made innovation everyone's business. So the caregivers, actually, we came up with a reward system. If they're able to disrupt every single day by engaging in something. In our industry, one of the things I realized is that, yes, as management staff, we can do a lot, but if the caregivers and your aides and your kitchen staff, if they're not willing to embrace, and really it's very cultural for us, and at this point, many of the things that I shared actually came from my caregivers.
The suggestion box, yeah. Other questions?
Essentially, like for example, S stands for creating unique stories. I'll give you an example. Where we are from, we get a lot of snow, and how do you disrupt customer service? We all provide great customer service. We try to be as relevant as possible. So one of the things the receptionist did was when the client's family came in to visit, she asked for the family's car keys. And she said, when you're ready to go, let us know, we'll warm your car up. So little stuff. That's just one thing. And that's how when it really becomes part of your fabric.
JJ, you had a question?
J.J. Johnson with Cornell Communications. Gene, thank you for that memory talk discussion. Why do you think I'll just say the medical or the total community has sort of given up on the Alzheimer's person and say tolerate the stages and care for them, not is there something?
You have to ask me that question.
Yeah.
Well, what I've realized is the good thing is I'm an occupational therapist. And when we designed this program, in the medical industry, it all has to be evidence-based. There's been a lot of push for evidence-based approaches. And I kind of agree with Kian, where he said you don't really have to. I mean, if you think it's a great idea, do it. It's going to create chaos. And one of the things I personally have seen, again, is I used to work for a very large firm before I decided to go on my own. The only reason I left the large firm was the decision makers in that firm lacked the medical knowledge. I think that's very important, at least to understand if we decide to go on to do memory care. We got to you have to have a basic understanding of brain functions, how the brain works. And if you ask any neuroscientist, they'll tell you that, what do you know about the human brain? And they'll say nothing. I'll give you another example. We have players in our markets where they do white linen dining for individuals with memory care. And that's something that I didn't quite understand at all. Because with Alzheimer's and certain forms of dementia, the clients do tend to retrogenesis. They revert back to their early childhood days. And you ask yourself, how many times you and I did white linen dining? Either it's Valentine's Day or it's a special day. And we're under a lot of pressure because we want to be the best. However, when families come, they like that part because the way that program is sold is, well, we do not discriminate. It doesn't matter whether your dad or mom has memory care or memory care issues or no memory care issues. We treat them right, it's the same. See, that's where the challenge is. Once you understand retrogenesis, because the clients do revert back to their early childhood days, they are between the ages of 9 months to 20 years of age as they decline through the stages, and creating an environment where they're comfortable with. And so, I don't know if I answered your question, but.
So maybe I can add something. Actually, this is working, thank you. So JJ, I took out a couple slides that I really like just in the interest of time, so I'm going to plug them in here. I think everyone doesn't have to be an innovator, right? All of us can't be innovators, then that hump is going to be just all green. But when someone like Gene does what he does, then you can be an early adopter. And if you're not an early adopter, following what he's doing and doing what they did in the Netherlands, you can go to the next one. So the two slides, one of them was a map of the world, circa 1400. And also the edge of that map, of course it's not an accurate map, but at the time that was a map. So the edge of it, in Latin, it says, where dragons lie. And that's what we face every day. We think the limits of what we are, and whether it's Alzheimer's or anything else. And some people go beyond those limits and great things happen. But we don't all have to do that. But if someone's doing it, there's great suppliers, great technology companies here. Maybe they can show there's something beyond the edge, or people who've done it. And so it's nice to kind of keep that going as an industry and keep moving. I think that's huge. The other slide I took out was a Tesla. And so we don't all have to be Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, right? But he did something incredible. He created a car that's it's ridiculous. It's faster than any production car. It's safer than anything ever tested. It doesn't use oil. It created a whole network of charging stations around the country. So car companies had to adjust. But for Musk, we wouldn't have all these electric cars now, every manufacturer adjusting. We just have to sometimes look and say, this is coming. Amazon's coming. At Argentum, one of the presenters, the keynotes, asked the industry, said, what would you do tomorrow if you knew Amazon was coming in your industry? So sometimes it's not so hard if you just see what's coming. Netflix saw it.
I still think that we can actually be an Apple. We really can. And I beg to differ with the keynote last night. The only reason I say that is when we start listening to our clients, when we start listening to our families, they start teaching us. And we will be able to design services and program that's very relevant to them. In fact, with the information knowledge that they give us, we will be able to be creative and innovative in actually creating a market, a product, a program where you could be on the cutting edge and you could be that Apple. So I think there's still a lot of room in our industry to be very creative and innovative.
No question.
Thank you. Sharon Riccardi from Northbridge. For Kian and Jean, one of the things that I keep thinking about as we try to innovate, particularly with people with Alzheimer's, one of the, I guess, stumbling blocks we see over and over again is bringing the payer sources into our dream for a better life for people with Alzheimer's. An example I'll give you is trying to get them to keep bringing rehab in long enough so that the rehab that they're giving to someone with, even mild dementia sticks, because regulations right now say not enough progress, must stop. And sometimes it's right before that breakthrough would happen that would improve their lives. And I just wonder if either of you think that part of what's keeping us from taking the next step is pure and simple age discrimination. Do you see that?
You want to go first, Keith?
Oh, you give me the tough one.
You want me to?
No, that's okay. So I didn't think that's what you were about to ask. I thought you were about to ask the regulatory and payment systems from where you were going. But age discrimination is another way to look at it. And maybe as a country, as a society, we're not supporting things the right way. And of course, we're just a small part of our broken sick care system anyway. And so there will be challenges if, as an organization, you depend on certain revenue streams and they don't support some other things. I can tell you this, though, that 93 out of those 100 and many, many more over time are going to get those types of services on a private pay basis. And Bill touched on it last night. So the challenge is, how do we incorporate that? We have this artificial line between when something is paid by an insurance company or CMS versus by the daughter or reverse mortgage or your estate. If you go to Canada and other places, that line doesn't exist. And the same organization could do both. So I challenge looking at other models right probably next door that are supporting private pay, those types of services, and seeing if that model could be complementary to what you're doing.
There's a huge movement going on right now in New York. It's to do with aging. To respond to your question in a very nice way, I think there is an imaginary perception because older folks are as seen as they're getting ready to go out the door. Children are being seen as they're the future citizens of this country. Culturally, we are very different. If you travel to East Asia, you travel to certain parts of Europe, the elderly are revered. They're seen as people with wisdom, knowledge, maturity, whereas over here, culturally, I think we're a little bit behind with things, but things are changing. Now, regarding regulatory bodies, you're absolutely right. One of the biggest challenges I have, I'm not kidding, stupid me, I don't know if as I'm getting older, I'm becoming less patient. The building that I showed you, the second building that I showed you, I lost $60,000 for 8 months because I was very adamant with the Department of Commerce. They asked me to move the door for fire exit, and I refused to do it. And I told them there was a reason why I wanted the door in a certain location, because visually when the client walks through the door, we created a hollow space which we thought would trigger them to actually take a left turn. So I had to fight with them for 8 months. I lost $60,000 a month having an empty building. So yes, it's time for us to educate the regulatory bodies. We are still, in very early stages. But if we all do it little by little, little by little, little by little, we have the ability to change the entire industry.